I love it.
So my name is Rosemary Villarreal. I work here. I live here. I grew up here. I volunteer here. And this is very important to me. There's not a lot of representation in Waterford, and seeing all of you guys out here is just really touching for me, and I just know that our kids need that too.
So my name is Hannah Mathers, and I'm so grateful to be here standing with you for racial justice. So this is a peaceful protest. By being here, we are all, attendees and police officers, committed to peace. If you see anyone doing anything otherwise, please address it immediately or ask a fellow protester or one of the hosts to address it. We are here because we all deeply believe and desire that a world without systemic racism is possible. And in order to find that world, we will have to get uncomfortable. I'd like to now read a statement from Chief Underwood of the Waterford Police Department. The Waterford Police Department supports peaceful protests, and we remain committed to ensuring that racism plays no part in law enforcement. We believe that everyone is entitled to equal protection under the law, and we stand ready to work alongside citizens to ensure a safe environment for all people to live, work, and visit. Thank you, Chief Underwood and the Waterford Police, for your support of this peaceful demonstration. We hope that this statement is the beginning of an ongoing conversation and continued action towards racial justice in the WPD's work. We hope you, Waterford Police Department, see clearly today that we are all concerned about racism. We hope you continually fight racism in yourselves, your department, and your peers. We hope we as a community continue to hold each other accountable to our commitment. We as a community will hold each other accountable. In order to end systemic racism once and for all, we need each and every one of you, all of us, on board fully. As white people, let us no longer be silent in the face of racial injustice, because our silence is violence. As the great activist, educator, and professor Angela Davis teaches us, in a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. That means fighting racism within ourselves, our families, our friends, and our communities as a whole. Thank you. Yes. Let us continue educating ourselves, donating, calling our representatives, voting for those dedicated to racial justice, and listening to the Black community and other people of color about these issues. Please, let us address racism every time we notice.
To the Waterford Police Department, I appreciate you. I am not a resident of Waterford, but to all of the people who live here, the people who serve here, the people who work here every single day, I'm truly grateful as a Black man to see you all here supporting us, supporting the movement. So for me to you all, I want to say thank you. For some of you all, this may be the first time having a conversation with a Black person, going deep in depth into being a Black man. In elementary school, I was taught that be all you can be is one of the things that America is most proud of. But I just didn't know that the color of my skin would be the determining factor of that. We was taught that in this world where you can be anything you want to be in this world, be yourself. But yet, time after time, we're still getting killed for doing just that. Black Lives Matter is not a movement for us. It's our reality. So as I appreciate the songs, as I appreciate the protesting and the marching, we've been marching for years. We've been putting up signs for years. The question becomes, what are we going to do after this? Because the pictures look good. I seen all 50 states, they were red, all of the protesting happening. And this is, I think, one of the first times where the Black man is getting the recognition, the support from people all over the world. And that's step number one. I have to be honest with you all. This is not about right versus wrong. We was taught that in middle school. This is not about just versus unjust. We was taught that in high school. For us, this is about living versus dying. I'm an international speaker. I'm a best-selling author. I'm a 2-time award-winning bodybuilder. I'm the creator of my own nonprofit organization, Family, which stands for Forget About Me, I Love You, where we focus on at-risk youth while building families amongst families. I'm also the creator of the lifestyle and global brand 1% Better, because I believe that every day that you wake up, you should ask yourself a simple question. How can you become at least 1% better today? Now, as great as that is, as great as of a resume that is on paper, I'm 29 years old. I graduated from Michigan State University. I got my degree in electrical engineering. The list goes on and on. So I can continue to go on the list of accomplishments that I've made. I can talk about all the awards and recognitions I received at the young age of 29. But I'm in fear of my life when I get pulled over by a police officer. When I'm walking outside the street, I can run. If I go for a run, I can be gunned down. If I put my hood on in the wrong neighborhood, I can be gunned down. These are the things that I think about, even in my success. Even though I've been able to, I'm from 48205, for those who don't know. I always tell people I'm from the infamous zip code of 48205. Because in the last decade, 48205 has made it on the top 10 worst listed neighborhoods to live in the United States of America. It said that children from this zip code will struggle in elementary, middle, and high school. They're more likely to involve themselves in drugs, violence, and physical activity at an early age. They're less likely to receive a high school diploma and even more less likely to obtain a college degree. By the age of 21, they will have anywhere between 3 children. And by the age of 25, they will have a criminal background or dead. Now, I stand before you all at the age of 29 letting you know I'm a proud product of 48205 and I'm not a statistic. But even as a black man, even when you defeat the odds, even when you beat the stereotypes, even when you are a noble citizen, because of the color of your skin, you'll be treated differently. So I want to tell you all 3 things before I leave you. The first step is unity. What we're doing today, coming together. That's just unity. That's not solidarity. It's a big difference. Because we can come together and protest and peacefully march. But when you go home, what are you talking about? What are you teaching your kids? Racism is not something that's born inside of you. I'm sorry. Racism is taught. You are educated on this. You are conditioned. And I'm not saying you as a person, but those who are racist. Excuse me. So step number 1 is unity. We have to have this conversation. Step number 2 is accountability. She said silence is violence. So I'm appreciative of each and every one of you all standing up for us. I'm appreciating each and every one of you all who are taking the time out of your day, because you can be doing so many other things right now. Instead of listening to a black man talk about the struggles, even through his success. So I need you all to hold yourself accountable. I need you to hold your friends accountable. I need you to hold your family accountable, because our lives are dependent on it. And then the last thing. Thank you. And the last and the most important step, and I'll get out in front of you all faces, is change. All of this is pointless if there's no change. Somebody once said, a wise man said, the best apology is change behavior. We're not looking for I'm sorry, because what's done is done. We're looking for change within a system that was created without us in mind. We're looking for change in leadership positions. We're looking for change in the media. We're looking for change in the way that you all see us. Because I can assure you, we come with love. We come in peace. We come in solidarity. We come in the same form that you come in, just with a darker skin tone. So coming together is great. Protesting is even better. But more importantly, when each and every one of you leave here, I urge you to have the conversation with your kids, with your family, with your spouses, and let them know in order for us to change the world together, we got to change ourselves. So I thank you all for listening to me. And Black Lives Matter because it's a reality, not because it's a movement. Thank you. Thank you all, and now I'm going to introduce the dynamic Kayla.
Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter! I love it. My name is Kayla Kennard. I'm a native from Detroit, Michigan. I'm a graduate from Wayne State University, and I'm a community organizer. I've had the opportunity to use my voice on multiple platforms, including local radio and platforms such as CNN, and it is an honor to be in front of you all today in the fight for justice.
Thank you.
In the fearless spirit of my ancestors, I appeal to you to discuss a developing social practice, honoring the incomparable work of leaders such as Ella Baker and Fred Hampton, and all those who have contributed to what many have called an international revolutionary proletarian struggle, I speak to and demand of you today. The premise of my appeal is white solidarity in the movement for justice and black liberation. A subject controversial in the movement, so much so that it is newly developing in my own justice practices. As a proud student of El Haj Malik Shabazz, known to many of you as Malcolm X, I admit that I have struggled with the concept of solidarity in the movement. In the process of my maturation and development as an organizer, pacifist thought has often influenced my perspective on what solidarity should look like. Censoring my commentary, avoiding radical social posts, and avoiding the generalization of white people have all been conscious efforts to maintain peace between myself and those who don't look like me. Minimizing the truth of my existence was never an innate inclination. It was taught and reinforced by authorities who feared the depth of my power. Most often, these doctrines were instilled in me by white authority figures who were delusional in thinking their alliance meant reinforcing that I considered their comfort zone when vocalizing the fullness of my black experience. This tactic is rooted in white supremacy, as white ignorance and comfort rest on the intentional muting of black voices. This silencing practice is not only despicable, but as my sister said earlier, it is violence against black people, producing both tangible and intangible outcomes. To be holistic in my critique, I must contend that white folk weren't the only individuals to instill this thinking within me. In reality, black faces who spewed a distorted kumbaya vision were hindrance to my own self-actualization. More drastically, these figures taught me that appealing to white emotion and pleading for empathy on behalf of my humanity was the key to success. Regardless of this approach, the poor economic and political condition of my people never seemed to change. I was even coerced into believing a distorted and diluted narrative about leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., naively believing his efforts were non-radical and that his work was most oriented around white acceptance and not liberation for black people. This caused internal conundrum, as history revealed to me whether I embraced the methods of Malcolm or Martin, America still executed them both. Knowing this history, I admit that it's not easy to stand before you today. Nevertheless, in truth and power, my black voice must be heard. Now, growing up, I was privileged to attend suburban private schools. My parents and grandparents helped to sacrifice to ensure that 30 to 40 committed mutes from the city of Detroit resulted in me receiving a superior education. Though the economic investment proved its benefit, being educated in a community that wasn't my own subjected me to racism and microaggressions well before I had the language to identify them. I can recall the shame and anger I felt at the age of 11 when a white math teacher accused every black boy in my class for stealing dimes used in a class experiment. Though a fellow white student admitted to misplacing them, my teacher was adamant that he was only covering for 11-year-old black boys. These experiences compounded in high school as I was in a culture of white supremacy and racist apologists. I was in a culture where students who spread blackface on social media went unpunished, and nooses at pep rallies were not uncommon occurrences. Though these are equally disgusting, I will never forget the anger I felt after my school concluded that we could no longer host a powerful black speaker who conducts seminars on the history of racism in America. During his last visit to my school, teachers walked out of his lecture on the black struggle in America stating that they didn't want to hear it. And because my white classmates found history to be disturbing, administration concluded that we could no longer host these forums. In hindsight, I recognize that white privilege convinced my school faculty that while ignoring the black experience, they'd remain qualified to teach me. and their lives remain unchanged. Racism was the use of power to silence black voices for the sake of white comfort. Recalling these experiences can be burdensome, but I recognize that here in Waterford, Michigan, a city with a population that is nearly 93% white, it is impossible for you to understand my call to action without first bearing witness to my condition. And so, for those of you that are here not to be convinced, but to learn how to take action collectively, the question remains, what can white allies do to stand in solidarity with the black community? First, I think it's imperative that we define what solidarity is in its truest sense. Solidarity is a radical sentiment. It is not solely empathy, but is a derivative of it. Textbooks define it as a unifying opinion, feeling, or interest, a social cohesion, and collective responsibility. In simplest terms, solidarity is not your sympathy. It is your action. In this hour, solidarity with the black movement requires your active engagement. The first thing I want to let you all know is that in order to be engaged, you must first be educated. It is no longer acceptable to be ignorant of the definitions of racism, white privilege, or white supremacy. I want to make it clear that racism is not just an anti-black attitude. In the words of Stokely Carmichael, if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. But if he's got the power to lynch me, that's my problem. Understanding racism requires you to recognize it as an oppressive system that determines a black person's political power, access to resources, and ability to define our own lives. It is a tool of white supremacy that must be dismantled. End it now. Furthermore, you must make an investment to liberate your own minds by committing to the study of systems of oppression, its beneficiaries, and its victims. As a black person living in America, I don't have the privilege of ignorance. While I learned history in school, when I returned home, I had to commit myself to the study of my own people and history. I bought books and watched films on revolutionary work that predominantly white institutions chose to ignore. I'd like to emphasize that you must do the work yourself. Though it is important to ask questions, black people are not solely responsible for your education on oppression. We are hurting. Black people across this globe are hurting, and we are healing. We are fighting, and we are focused on preserving our own black lives. Racism is not an institution that was built by black people. You must help, as you are responsible in helping to dismantle it. Thirdly, you must organize in suburban and white communities. In the 1960s, Stokely Carmichael asserted, "There is no doubt in our minds that some whites are just as disgusted as we are with the system. But it is meaningless to talk coalition if there is no one to align ourselves with because of the lack of organization in white communities." In the past week, I've been affected by the passion of white and other non-black protesters. I've witnessed young white folk physically put their bodies on the line for black folk, often willing to bleed on behalf of black bodies. This tells me that we are capable of creating a new blueprint for revolution. My optimism compels me to believe it is possible, but you must do the work. Don't just come to ground zero in cities across the nation, often joining black people in their communities. Organize in your communities. Develop institutions against racism and police brutality. Educate your family members, friends, and neighbors, have the radical and uncomfortable conversations. Host events on dismantling white supremacy with your fellow white citizen. Protest in your streets. Demand police accountability and raise hell until the fight for black people is won. Along with organizing, you must make an economic investment in this fight for justice. Now, whenever we talk about money in the movement, you start to see who's down and who isn't. Funding freedom is an essential component of social justice work. It advances the black agenda. It allows our leaders to travel and increases our political power. Financially investing in the cause is what moves us forward. Donate to black organizations like Reclaim the Block in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Detroit Justice Center, and Until Freedom generously. And if there's an individual, corporation, or organization that is anti-black in speech or deed, end your financial support today. Just like your financial support, solidarity comes in political support. Many of us are here because we saw the senseless murder of George Floyd as the tipping point for social change. It was a blatant physical assault on a black body, but for those of us who are still breathing, I echo the words of a mentor by the name of Reverend Al Sharpton when I say we have a systemic knee on our necks that white allies must be responsible in helping to remove. To be in political solidarity, you must vote with black people in mind. To vote for candidates without consideration of their platform's impact on black people results in the direct harm towards my community. Now, I was asked to also bring a message for police. I don't have much to say because I believe gradual reform and sensitivity training doesn't abolish police brutality. Collectively, you can clap, go ahead. It's true. Collectively, the people are calling for policies that defund and demilitarize corrupt police forces across this nation, and rightfully so.
Yes. Yes.
For those of you who truly seek to stand with the people, understand that your solidarity is not in simply kneeling or walking with us. You see, over the past week, I've watched officers who kneeled and marched with the people tear gas them and shoot them with rubber bullets in the same hour. In a more disgusting media case, I saw one officer in Buffalo, New York, kneel one moment and knock an elderly man unconscious as well. So, police officers, I'm looking around, I see a few of you. If you want to stand with us, tear down the blue wall of silence. I'm going to say it again in case there's some that didn't hear me. Tear down the blue wall of silence and expose the unethical and anti-black practices that enable and accommodate corrupt police behavior. You see, George Floyd was not the victim of a few bad apples. Breonna Taylor was not the victim of a few bad apples. Thank you, sister. Aaron Gardner was not the victim of a bad apple. Philando Castile was not the victim of a bad apple. Mike Brown, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, Tatiana Jefferson, Ayanna Stanley Jones, and so many more. None of these were victims of bad apples. My fallen brothers and sisters were not victims of bad apples. They were victims of a bad system. So to my police officers, it is your duty to practice internal accountability each and every day you show up to work. If there are 100 officers, 10 of them corrupt, and 90 are silent, you have 100 bad cops. Every person that puts on the uniform, you are part of the system. Do the work and initiate change. Now, though we've discussed racism here today, it is imperative that we recognize it as a symptom of a more lethal disease. I won't belabor the point in this moment, but to understand white solidarity with the black community is to understand capitalism as our common enemy. Brother Fred Hampton, a leader in the Black Panther Party, taught us that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. You see, when the slaves first landed upon these shores, it was to make America money. Capitalism is the overarching system that exploits the poor. Under this structure, wealth determines one's socioeconomic class and political power. We must understand that to uphold private interest is to derail the revolution. Revolution is a class struggle in which we all must become free. Now, though I placed many demands on you today, I'll leave you all with encouragement. Many of us have gathered here in righteous anger. But if the fight is still unclear at this hour, we are demanding justice for black lives across this globe. We are opposing a police state that abuses its power and takes away black lives. We are resisting against systems of oppression and demanding that the chains of injustice be broken. In the words of Ella Baker, a personal inspiration of mine, a nice gathering like today is not enough. You have to go back and reach out to your neighbors who don't speak to you. And you have to reach out to your friends who think that they are making it good. And get them to understand that they, as well as you and I, cannot be free in America or anywhere else where there is capitalism or imperialism. Until we can get people to recognize that they themselves have to make the struggle and have to make the fight for freedom every day in the year, every year, until they win it. In solidarity, may we fight for justice, may we fight against police brutality, and may we make the fight for freedom an everyday struggle. God bless you, and more power to the people.
I now want to introduce John Paul Torres, who is the Waterford School Board Trustee.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I want to say how proud I am to see so many people from my community out here. As I've walked around, yeah, you can clap for that. As I walk around today and I look at all of the people in the community that I represent as a school board trustee here today, it makes me proud. So I'm John Paul Torres, and I'm a school board trustee here in Waterford Township. I also work in law enforcement and have for nearly 20 years. What I want to do is I want to take a few moments to recognize a few change makers that are here in this crowd today. So we're talking about change, as you so eloquently said, both of you, and this is what it's going to take. So we have with us Barnett Jones, and it was mentioned, I'll go through all of them and then you can clap. Barnett Jones, it is an honor to be up here with him. The former chief of police in Sterling Heights and Ann Arbor, and current candidate for Oakland County Sheriff. Here in Waterford Township, we have several candidates that are running for township offices. So when we talk about change, right, we talk about changing the system from within and getting into positions of power so that we can move those systems to change in the right direction. So I want to recognize candidate Eric Lindmeyer, who is here running for township treasurer. I want to recognize Cynthia Antimo, who is running for township trustee. recognize Jason Herr, who is also running for Township Trustee. I want to recognize Matt McClure, who is also running for Waterford Township Trustee. And I want to recognize two other individuals who may get in here once we start marching. Current Oakland County Treasurer Andy Meisner and candidate for Oakland County Executive, and Justin Clark, candidate for Oakland County Clerk. So these are all people. These are all people who are change makers. And also, I would be remiss, and I didn't see her earlier, we have the candidate who is running for the state representative seat that would represent Waterford, Miss Nicole Braden. So when we talk about change and what we are looking to see within our systems, this is how it happens. You put your name on a ballot. You get on the ballot and you run for office and you put forth the effort that you want. Now, part of why I wanted to speak today and why it was reached out to me is because, I live here in Waterford and I love my community. I've been here for 20 years. So much so that I decided that I one day wanted to run for township or for school board and then later on to the township office. But in doing that, you think about when you get into positions of power, you got to begin to think about how you can implement change and what kinds of positive things that you can do. And part of what I've seen in my career, as I said, working in law enforcement, I spent about 10 years working as a probation officer, about another 5 years as a program director, and then on to a court administrator. And one of the things that I began to see early on, from my very first day on the job, was the inequalities that we see in our justice system. And I would guess that Mr. Barnett Jones probably would have seen the same and will talk about the same. So we have to figure out, how do we educate ourselves? How do we recognize what we can do to implement the change? And a lot of that is what we are doing right now. That's educating ourselves. That's having the difficult conversations and talking about what we need to do and how important it can be to implement this change that we're looking for. So I applaud everybody for doing this. And I also want to recognize our Waterford Township Police Department that's here today. Them extending their hand. You can give them a clap. And speaking with the organizer, I know that they extended their hand and they said they wanted to make sure that we are allowed to peacefully protest in this community. And Chief Underwood and all of the police department, you have my sincere recognition and thanks for doing this today. Now, when we look at how we can implement change and what we can do, we go back to the idea of education. So how do we educate ourselves? That is going through and looking at the hard facts of what exists in America and what we can do to change that. As a court administrator, I looked at it for many years and I said, I see a lot of my fellow brown brothers and sisters out there and my black brothers and sisters out there struggling and disproportionately being represented in the justice system, right? How can we change that? What can we do? We educate ourselves. We learn about the various different kinds of programs and the social work approaches that we have in the justice system. We have the conversations of understanding that some of us may have implicit biases. And we recognize the fact that we can work towards getting rid of those implicit biases. It is all very important, but it's part of the process that we need to have. This is a pivotal time in America right now. I'm 41 years old, and I've seen some things as I thought. And I thought it culminated with COVID-19, and before that I thought it was 9/11, and now I am seeing this movement that exists right now where people are talking about the importance of Black Lives Matter on a national scale. And it's not just people, it's not just black people, it's not just brown people, it's all people, it's white people. And we have to continue the conversation and continue to move forward and have it. Now, we have to take advantage of this opportunity that we have at a pivotal time in America. This is the moment where we can implement the change that we want to see, that we can implement the goodness that we all know exists. We all want good things. We all want our children to have a good life, to have a good education, to go on to become and be successful. But how we get there oftentimes is where we disagree. So what we have to remember right now is, even if it's uncomfortable, we may disagree. We may disagree significantly, but we must always remember that it is important that we keep our eye on the target and we get to the point that we want to get to, so that we can begin to see the inequalities in our system begin to change over time, and eventually see the successes and all of this bear some fruit. So I want to yield a few minutes of my time to our candidate for Oakland County Sheriff and former Police Chief Barnett Jones. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hello. I heard the words of the brother and sister who happen to be black, so I call them brother and sister, a lot younger than me. But I want to take you back, because John Paul told you a little bit about my history. He said I was the chief of police in Sterling Heights, and I was the chief of police in Ann Arbor. But I had a career before I got to Sterling Heights. So I want to take you there. You see, I worked at the Oakland County Sheriff's Department in 1982. I started patrolling out here. You can imagine what that was like. Waterford police backed me up all the time. Great guys. I rose up through the ranks. The sheriff at the time was John F. Nichols. Most of you don't even know his name. A living legend in law enforcement. He saw me. He recognized my ability to lead. And he started making sure that I put in the work and got an education so that he could promote me. Because you know, we had to do it the right way. So I took the sergeant's test. I finished first on the list. I was the 5th person promoted. I moved through the sergeant's test to the sergeant's rank, and I became a lieutenant. And then I was blessed, and I became a captain. And all along the way, the sheriff was promoting me and training me and making sure that I did the work to get the recognition. I was the first person of color from the Oakland County Sheriff's Department to go to the FBI National Academy, and I graduated. John F. Nichols called me his legacy. He said, when I die, because he was an old man, but he wasn't going to give up the ghost. He was going to die with his boots on. He said, when I die, you're going to be next. I want to let everybody know, you're going to be next. You got an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's, FBI, Secret Service, Staff and Command. I even got accepted into Harvard Fellowship School. I had it all. But when he died, they appointed somebody else. Someone that didn't look like me, that had the education I had, didn't have the experience I had never worked in the department, had never been a command officer, and said, Oakland County is not ready for a black sheriff. So I went to Sterling Heights. One of the things I'm telling you is that for 44 years in law enforcement, I've had one foot in law enforcement, and the other foot, when I take my uniform off, I become a black man. It is what we know. It is how we live. You put your head down and you march to do something better, to protect yourself, to protect your family. And never before in my life would I expect to see what I am seeing here today. Yeah. Never before in my life would I think in Waterford Township that people that didn't look like me would stand up for people that look like me. across this country. You have started a movement in America, and it's long past time. It is time for all of us to live. If there's injustice for one, there is injustice for everyone. And I have one more thing to say. I am a damn good, and there are plenty of them. But we have got to stand up and get them worthless mother you-know-whats out of our profession.
There's one other thing one other person that's here today that I want to recognize, and that is Oakland County Circuit Court candidate Lorie Slavin is here as well. And Lorie, if you could raise your hand. And this is important, this is very important, because our judges are the ones that are going to be part of this process and part of this change that we see in America. All right, thank you.